You are now listening to the Bayshore Community Church podcast. Our mission is to connect to God, connect to people, and to serve the community. Thank you for joining us today, and wherever you are listening, we hope that this message inspires you, encourages you, and transforms you. Our prayer is that this is just the beginning of a conversation between you and Jesus. Enjoy the message.
Thank you. It is so good to be with you guys this morning. And this is such a cool morning because we actually have all of our campuses joining together this morning. So I'm here at our Millsboro campus, but we also have our Fenwick campus, our online campus, and my home, our Rehoboth campus, all joining us this morning. And if we haven't met before, as Pastor Danny said, my name is Cotter, and I am the Next Steps pastor at our Bayshore Rehoboth campus. And this is my first time getting to speak here at our Millsboro campus, but this actually isn't my first time being up on this stage. I actually grew up attending Bayshore, and this was back in the Gumboro Fellowship days. I would always sit right over here. And the first time I was actually on the stage was a Christmas play when I was in elementary school. I went to school at Epworth Christian just down the road in Laurel, and when I was in fourth grade, I was actually right here on the stage singing in a musical with my class from Epworth. I was one of the three wise men, and I'm not sure who chose me for that role because I can't sing at all. At all. I've heard rumors that Pastor Danny just has this incredible voice and he can lead worship. That is not me. I don't share that talent with him at all. But the whole night of our musical was so crazy. I can't believe my parents actually came and sat through that and listened to me sing for like 2 hours. That had to have just been so terrible. That was some real love by them. And it was a funny night because my friend Trey, he was another one of the wise men, and he was so nervous that night. So nervous that in the middle of the play, backstage, he actually threw up on baby Jesus. No lie. Unfortunately, that 100% happened. But all that to say, I'm just so thankful for the opportunity to be with you guys this morning. And I just love when we're able to unite all four of our campuses together at the same time. And I want to give a huge shout out to our other campuses this morning. So Millsboro, I need you guys to make some noise for our Fenwick campus, our online campus, and our Rehoboth campus. Can you help me in making some noise for them? So today we're in week 2 of our Christmas at the Movie series, and last week we looked at Elf, which is such a great movie. But today we are looking at what is, in my opinion, the best movie of all time. Now, not the best Christmas movie of all time, literally the best movie of all time, and that is The Grinch. Now, there are 3 things that you guys need to know about me, and the first one is that I have a beautiful wife named Emily, and she's my best friend. She's awesome. We've got a picture of her. This was us this summer. And the second thing you need to know about me is that I have a slightly less beautiful, but still very beautiful dog named Koa. And he's awesome. We got a picture of him. He's a Siberian Husky, and our Rehoboth campus knows that I will find any excuse I can to show you guys a picture of my boy Koa. I love him. And the third thing you guys need to know about me is that I love The Grinch. I love the Jim Carrey version of The Grinch so much. Now, there's a lot of different Grinch opinions out there, so I just want to see where you guys are at. If you're watching online, throw a comment in on YouTube or Facebook. And if you're in Fenwick or Rehoboth, make sure you're tossing those hands up because I'm going to check in with Jeremy and Bo this afternoon to find out where my true Grinch fans are. So whose favorite version of The Grinch is the book? Anybody? Nobody at all. Whose favorite version of The Grinch is the original cartoon movie? That's a good one. All right, we got some fans. That's what I grew up watching. How about the new cartoon movie that came out a couple years ago? Anybody like that? It's pretty good. Some kids like it. It's a good one. All right, now where are my true Grinch fans at that love the Jim Carrey version? All right. You guys are awesome. Man, I didn't expect that many. That's amazing. Nothing gets me more excited about Christmas than The Grinch. And in this series, we've been looking at ways that these Christmas movies can point us to Jesus. Now, if you're not familiar with the movie or the book, the story follows this guy named the Grinch, and he's named that because he has zero Christmas spirit. And he lives near a town called Whoville, and this town celebrates Christmas better than anyone else. They go all out for Christmas, and they go all out all year long. But the Grinch, he left Whoville when he was a child, and he made his home in a cave on a nearby mountain of Mount Crumpet. And this story follows this little girl from the town of Whoville named Cindy Lou Who as she tries to share the true meaning of Christmas with the Grinch. And at first, the Grinch isn't very receptive. He takes his anger out on Whoville by stealing all of their Christmas presents and all of their decorations. But eventually, the love that Cindy Lou Who shows to the Grinch, it breaks through those grumpy walls, and he sees the true meaning of Christmas, and he returns all of their presents. So the Grinch is just this bitter, unhappy dude, and he hates everything about Christmas. And he lives up on this mountain just looking down at Whoville, and he's just disgusted with their joy and their love for Christmas. And today, we're going to look at a few ways that we can fight off a Grinchy attitude in our lives. So one person that had a lot of reasons to be Grinchy around Christmas was this prophet that we see in the Bible named Anna. And when we read about Anna, we're picking up in this story just 8 days after Jesus was born. So Mary and Joseph, the parents of Jesus, they take him to church. And when they get to the temple, this lady named Anna is there. So we're going to check her story out. If you have your Bible with you, we're going to be in the book of Luke, and we're going to be in chapter 2, starting in verse 36. And if you don't have a Bible, we have free Bibles at each one of our campuses in the back. So make sure you grab one before you leave today. But we're going to toss these verses up on the screen so you can follow along. We're in Luke chapter 2, and we're going to be starting in verse 36. And here's what it says. Anna, a prophet, was also there in the temple. She was the daughter of Phanuel from the tribe of Asher, and she was very old. Her husband died when they had been married only 7 years. Then she lived as a widow to the age of 84. Now, here's what jumps out to me about Anna. After she had been married for only 7 years, her husband passed away. And she had been through some crazy things. Have any of you guys been through some crazy things? Anna had only been married 7 years, and then she lost her husband. But then she continued on to live alone until she was 84. Now, I've been only married for about 5.5 years, and I can't even fathom the thought of losing my wife in another 1.5 years and then being alone until I'm in my 80s. Now, I miss my wife when we're away at work for 10 hours a day. I can't imagine just flying solo for another 50 years. But Anna was all alone. She lost her husband. She was probably poor because in this society, women and widows were kind of pushed aside. Anna had been through some crazy, difficult things. And isn't it true that when we go through crazy things in our lives, our attitudes tend to get a little bit Grinchy? So often, my first response to pain and to stress and crazy things happening in my life is just to start complaining, to start pointing fingers at other people and blaming them for what's happening in my life. So many times I get bitter and frustrated, and it's easy to have a Grinchy attitude this time of year, right? Like shipping is taking longer, traffic is crazy, home goods is completely crazy. They're out of all their Christmas candles. It's freezing cold outside almost every day. You might still be eating leftover turkey from Thanksgiving 2 weeks ago. And I'm sure that 2-week-old turkey is starting to make you guys a little bit Grinchy. It's so easy for our attitudes to get negative when things don't go our way. But what I love about the story of Anna is how we see her respond to these crazy things in her life. So she lost her husband after just 7 years of marriage. And let's look back at this verse to see what she did. So we'll toss verse 37 up. It says, then she lived as a widow to the age of 84. She never left the temple, but stayed there day and night, worshiping God with fasting and prayer. So Anna lost her husband, and do you see what her response was? She went to the temple and she worshiped God, and she never left. She stayed there day and night, worshiping God with fasting and with prayer, and she didn't leave. So if you're taking notes this morning, our first point is to stay in the temple. Stay in the temple. Anna is an amazing example of how to handle pain and difficulties. When she experienced tragedy, she turned to the Lord instead of turning to anger. And Anna dedicated herself to worship rather than complaining. Anna committed to God through prayer rather than blaming God for the difficulties that she was facing. Anna could have responded to this tragedy in so many ways, but she never left the temple. Never. Her pain didn't overwhelm her because she placed Jesus at the center of her life. And staying in the temple, it doesn't mean that you guys just get here on a Sunday morning and you just hang out here in the auditorium all week long. That's not what it means. Because of Jesus, we don't have to be in this building to have fellowship with God. Staying in the temple means to rely on Jesus constantly. Staying in the temple is relying on Jesus. And I think the temptation that we all have during the Christmas season is to leave the temple by not relying on Jesus because we have all these plans and all these commitments for the holidays. And it's so easy for us to get consumed with the presents and the movies and the get-togethers and the decorations and the traditions and the family drama. And when we do that, Jesus loses his place at the center of our lives. It's so easy for us to take this holiday that happens because of Jesus and to make it about so many other things. And that's not something that we do on purpose, but when we have so many obligations, the family events, the Christmas card photo shoots, the school plays, it's easy to let these other things take over our attention. And the more we focus on these other things, the less that we're relying on Jesus. And this idea of staying in the temple and keeping Jesus at the center of our lives, it's something that we can learn more about in the book of John. In John chapter 15, Jesus was talking to his disciples, and this was shortly before he was going to be killed. And Jesus knew that his disciples were going to experience some crazy trials and some intense pain, and Jesus wanted to communicate to them about how they could keep their faith in the middle of what they were about to experience. So we'll toss this up on the screen. It's John chapter 15, verse 5, and here's what it says. It says, "Yes, I'm the vine, you are the branches. Those who remain in me and I in them will produce much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing." When we choose to stay in the temple, when we choose to remain in Jesus, we're choosing to be rooted in God. We're choosing to make Jesus our focus and not all of these other distractions. And when we do this, we do it by praying instead of complaining. We do it by opening our Bible app instead of opening Instagram. We do it by turning on church instead of turning on Netflix. We do this by making small, consistent decisions throughout our day to place Jesus at the center of our lives. And in the story of the Grinch, there's this really big contrast between this wonderful, joyous, Christmas-loving town of Whoville and then this tall, creepy, nearby mountain known as Mount Crumpet where the Grinch lives. And when the Grinch was young, he lived in Whoville. He loved Christmas. But then he experienced pain as a child, and he responded to that pain by leaving Whoville and separating himself from everyone and everything that he knew. He left this Christmas-loving town, and he went up to Mount Crumpet, where he made his home alone. And over time, as the Grinch grew more and more isolated from Whoville, his anger grew, and his bitterness grew, and his frustrations grew. And the longer that he was away, the more his pain separated him from his roots. He no longer loved Christmas. And over time, that lack of love, it turned into hate. And the Grinch was separated from his roots. He was isolated. And this separation, it deprived him of his joy and his love. And we'll put this verse from John 15 back up on the screen. It says, "Yes, I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who remain in me and I in them will produce much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing." Now, these verses in the book of John, they say that Jesus is the vine, that we are the branches. And a branch grows from its roots, and Jesus is the source of that growth in us. We need to be connected to Jesus constantly because that's where our roots are. And being rooted in Christ, being rooted in God's promises, that will hold you up when you go through trials. Now, my wife, Emily, and I, we come from families that are really big into trees and plants and things like that. My parents and my brother all have degrees in things like landscape design and landscape architecture, and they work in landscaping. When we're walking through the woods, they'll kind of point at a tree and call it by its scientific name. I have no idea what that means, and I just feel totally left out. Emily's dad is a state forester, and he manages thousands of acres of the state forest. But somehow Emily and I totally missed the plant genes in our families. We totally missed it. And so this summer, we bought these two plants to put in these pots outside of the front of our house. And we got a picture. We'll toss up. You can see our pots. But what you're seeing here, these two plants, these are not the original plants. These are actually plant number 7 and plant number 8. Since June, guys, When I say I didn't get the plant genes, you're starting to understand what I'm talking about. So we bought these 2 grasses in June, and we bought potting soil. We planted them, we watered them, and 3 weeks later, they were about as dead as a plant can possibly be. So in July, we bought 2 more. We bought different potting soil that was more expensive and supposed to be better, and we watered them this time a ton. And 3 weeks later, they were super dead also, just as dead as the first one. So this process continued for plants number 5 and 6, and now we're on plants number 7 and 8. And if you look closely at this picture, you can actually see that these plants, we didn't even take them out of the pots because we know they're just going to die anyway. I mean, what's the point? We've already killed 6 of them. And I tell you guys this story because those plants that we got originally in the summer, they never got their roots in deep. Their roots never took hold, and these plants couldn't get enough nutrients to survive. So let's put this verse back up on the screen. From John 15, it says, "Yes, I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who remain in me and I in them will produce much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing." And that's why it's so important for us to rely on Jesus, because he's our root system. Apart from Jesus, we can do nothing. Apart from Jesus, the stress of the holidays, the stress of your job, the stress of homeschooling your kids, that's going to be overwhelming. But when you connect to your roots, when you rely on Jesus in the midst of the difficulties and the challenges you face in life, you will thrive in those challenges. This verse says that we'll produce fruit when we remain in Jesus. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control. How many of you guys could use a little bit of that underneath the tree in 2020? Anna grew her roots in Jesus, and she responded to the personal tragedy in her life with worship and with prayer. And when we're connected with Jesus, when we're reading the Bible, when we're praying, when we're choosing to speak positive about the people around us instead of negative, then we're going to grow our roots. When we're holding on to the promises of God, choosing to believe God when he says in the Bible that he loves us, that he'll provide for us, that he's with us in our trials, that he goes before us in our battles, when we stay in the temple and when we're rooted in Jesus and rooted in his promises, then the challenges and the pressures of life and the holiday season and the challenges of money and parenting and work, those things will not be able to knock you down. They cannot knock you down because Jesus is your root system. His promises will keep you standing. So stay in the temple and stay rooted in Jesus. Now, one of my favorite parts of the real-life Jim Carrey version of the Grinch movie, it actually has very little to do with the Grinch himself. In the original book, in the original cartoon, we're introduced to a character known as Cindy Lou Who, and they tell us that she was only 2 years old, but she has a very small role in the book and in the original cartoon, only having a brief encounter with the Grinch when he's in her home stealing all of her presents on Christmas Eve. But in the real-life movie, Cindy Lou is a few years older, and she has a really big part in the movie. And she loved Christmas, just like everyone else in Whoville, but she was struggling a little bit to get into the Christmas spirit this year. She was overwhelmed with the presents and the gifts, and she was searching for something deeper around Christmas time. And that all seemed to kind of happen because she was used as her parents' personal shopping cart. Now, we got a picture of this we can toss up on the screen. She's just like totally covered in presents. And in this letter, to try to find a deeper meaning in Christmas. And after a brief encounter with the Grinch, Cindy Lou wanted to find out why he hated Christmas so much. So we got Cindy Lou, who is trying to work through some strange feelings around Christmas. And that brings us back to the story of the prophet Anna. So in Luke 2, we read about her response to the tragic death of her husband and how she stayed in the temple. But there's another piece of her story that is so interesting. So we're going to look back to that section of the book of Luke, and we'll put these verses back up on the screen, beginning in verse 37. It says, "Then she lived as a widow to the age of 84. She never left the temple, but stayed there day and night, worshiping God with fasting and prayer. She came along just as Simeon was talking with Mary and Joseph, and she began praising God. She talked about the child to everyone who had been waiting expectantly for God to rescue Jerusalem." So Anna's been in the temple, and she's been worshiping God ever since her husband passed away. And during this time, everyone was waiting for the Savior to come. They didn't know when it would be. They didn't know who it would be. But they knew from the Old Testament scriptures that the Messiah was coming to provide salvation. Now, imagine Anna's joy when she saw Mary and Joseph and Jesus there in the temple. That had to be such an incredible moment to see the Messiah right in front of her. And Anna's response, as we see in verse 38, was to talk about the child to everyone who had been waiting expectantly for God to rescue Jerusalem. Anna was overwhelmed with thankfulness when she saw Jesus, and her response to seeing the Messiah, the one who had been promised for hundreds of years, was to immediately take that news and to share it with others. And have you guys ever had something that you've been waiting on? Maybe it's like a package to come in the mail. Maybe it's an acceptance letter to college. Maybe you've been waiting on your spouse to get so tired of the bad smell in the kitchen that they'll actually do the dishes. Now, that's how it works at our house. The dishes typically only get done when I can't cover up the smell with a Christmas candle. And then it's enough for me to finally be like, all right, I'll go ahead and wash these. Now, for the past month, I've been waiting on a package to come in the mail. I ordered this thing at the beginning of November. And every day, honestly, probably about like 4 times a day, I will go online and I look to see if it's shipped yet. And every time it just says pending. In giant bold letters, it just says pending. And nothing deflates my feelings of anticipation more than the word pending these days. And I don't know what it is, but that feeling of waiting on this order to ship, it's like a mini prison cell in my mind. Like as long as I'm waiting for this order to ship, I just have this feeling like something isn't quite right because waiting is difficult. And Anna knew this. She'd been waiting for so long for the Messiah, and she knew that the rest of her people had also been waiting for the Messiah as well. So this is her response to the news. First, she praised God. And the second thing she did was she shared this news with the others who had been also waiting for the Messiah. So if you're taking notes this morning, our second point today is to seek opportunities to encourage. Seek opportunities to encourage. Anna knew that these people were dealing with the difficulty of waiting for the Messiah. And her reaction to receiving this news was to try to find ways to share her encouragement with these other people. She wanted to cheer them up. Anna was aware of their pain, and she was willing to be used by God to encourage others. And that's something that we need to do in our lives. So often, the Christmas season, it just becomes about all the events that we're attending, the list of things that we need to accomplish, and the ways that we want to spend our vacation time off of work. It's all about us. It's all about what we've got going on in our lives, and we leave no space in our calendars to encourage the people around us. But Anna was looking past her circumstances to see the pain of the people that were around her, and she was willing to be used by God to encourage them in the midst of their pain. And it's so easy for us when we're not rooted in Jesus, when we're not staying in the temple by reading the Bible and being consistent in prayer, it's so easy for us to just become focused on ourselves, to be completely unaware of the pain and the trials that the people around us are experiencing. When our roots are not in Jesus, then it's a struggle to get through each day. It's a struggle to stay afloat and to manage the stress that we have in our own lives. But when we are rooted in Jesus, when we are finding our strength in God's promises, then He will sustain us in our trials, and He'll also give us the strength to look at the people around us and empathize with the pain that they're dealing with. And what I love about Cindy Lou Who is this was her. She was struggling. She was sitting in her window singing, "Where Are You, Christmas?" because she was having a rough time. And in the middle of her rough time, she focused in on the Grinch. She focused in on his pain. She set aside her own hurt, and she focused her energy on understanding the Grinch's pain and finding ways to help him heal. In Whoville, each year, they had someone that they nominated as the holiday cheermeister. And this person was someone who needed the Christmas spirit, somebody who needed a pat on the back. And while everyone else in Whoville was just terrified of the Grinch, and they were afraid to even mention his name, Cindy Lou nominated the Grinch for the award. So she climbed Mount Crumpet to personally deliver this invitation to the Grinch. We got a picture we can toss up. Now, look at this. How terrifying is that? Cindy Lou's like 18 inches tall. And the Grinch is this gigantic, scary, green dude. But Cindy Lou didn't mind. She wasn't thinking about herself. She wasn't focused on how bad her year was and how frustrated she was and how scared she was. The only thing that she cared about was reaching out to the Grinch and encouraging him. And what Anna and Cindy Lou Who have in common is that they were not focused on themselves. They were focused on the pain of the people around them. They were focused on how they could brighten someone else's day rather than wallowing in self-pity, thinking about their own problems. Anna didn't sit around feeling sorry for herself that she had just lost her spouse. even though she had every right to. Instead, she focused her attention on encouraging others. And Cindy Lou didn't sit around feeling sad about Christmas and how she felt left out, even though she had every right to. Instead, she focused her attention on encouraging someone around her. Now, a little over 3 years ago, in September of that year, my wife's grandmother, Nancy, had a stroke, and it was totally out of the blue, and it totally changed Nancy's life. And in one moment, she went from living on her own and taking care of herself to living in a hospital and being totally dependent on other people to take care of her. And as I'm sure you can imagine, that was a really hard transition in her life. And one of the hardest things about that year was that she had to spend Christmas alone. She was still in the hospital at Christmas time. And so she couldn't spend Christmas with her family. And thankfully that year we were able to get in the hospital and visit her. But that was the only taste of Christmas that she had. And at that time, Emily and I were in a band with a few of our friends, and one of those guys, one guy named Steve, he called us up, and he asked if the band could go into the hospital and sing Christmas carols for Nancy. And that was one of the most incredible things that I've ever seen, because Steve has a family. Steve has a full-time job. He's got kids. He's got grandparents of his own. He's got plenty of responsibilities in his life to take care of. He's got plenty of things on his plate around Christmas. But in the middle of that, he saw Emily's pain. He saw Nancy's pain, and he made it a priority to encourage them in the middle of their struggle. And he sought out that opportunity to encourage Nancy, and he made it a priority in his life. There are so many people that need your encouragement. 2020 has been a tough year. It's been a tough year on each of us. And what I believe that God wants his church to do this Christmas is to seek out opportunities to encourage others. We have hope because God sent his son Jesus to this world on Christmas Day. We've got hope for today, and we've got hope for eternity because we know that nothing can separate us from the love of God. And when we're rooted in Jesus, when we're staying in the temple, we will be filled with the fruits of love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness. And through the strength that God provides to us when we are living for him, we will then be able to reach out to the people around us to share our hope and to share our joy and to share God's love with them as well. Your encouragement, it can change someone's situation. You taking the time out of your schedule to be there for someone else that's in pain, that can change their life. You taking time to share with someone about the hope that you have in your trials because of what Jesus has done for you, that can change someone's eternity. On Monday nights, Emily and I, we have this tradition where we order takeout food for dinner because you guys know Mondays are tough. Mondays are not my favorite day of the week, and it's just nice to finish a Monday night with some delicious food. And we made a decision early on this year to try and support local restaurants whenever we're able to because we know they're struggling with the different challenges of this year. And there's a guy that owns a restaurant near our house in Salisbury named Raheem, and Raheem is awesome. I've been going to his restaurant for years because he makes the best chicken that I've ever had. No joke. This guy's chicken is absolutely out of this world. So over the years, I've made small talk with him when I'm paying for my food, but earlier this year, I was chatting for him when I went in to pick up my chicken gyro, and he was sharing about how his business has really been struggling this year. He was sharing about how difficult it's been to make ends meet and how it's just hard to even keep his doors open. And I just felt so bad for him. And look, here's what I decided. I decided that each time that I go into his store to pick up my takeout, I'm going to have no agenda. I'm going to have no timeline for leaving. I'm not going to worry about rushing home for Monday Night Football. I'm not going to worry about trying to beat traffic or trying to get home while my food's still warm. The commitment that I made to myself is that I'm going to ask Raheem about his life, and I'm going to look for ways to encourage him. I'm going to look for ways to share with him about my hope and my joy that I have in Jesus. And look, sometimes that conversation lasts 15 seconds. Other times that conversation lasts 10 or 15 minutes. But I'm available and I'm willing to be used to bring hope to this man who is facing some intense battles in his life. And it's a small thing, it's not much, but God has given me the free gift of salvation through Jesus. And because of that, I have joy, and I have hope, and I have peace, and I want to do my part to share that with the people that are around me. Anna looked past her circumstances to encourage the people around her. Cindy Lou looked past her circumstances to encourage the people that were around her. Who needs your hope? Who needs your joy? Who needs your encouragement? How can you be available to them? And how can you be willing to be there for them this holiday season? We are surrounded by people that are struggling, people that need the encouragement that we have as a result of our faith in Jesus. And we can be the difference in their lives. We can be the source of encouragement and hope that they need. This Christmas season, let's commit to staying in the temple, staying rooted in Jesus, and let's find ways to share our encouragement with the people around us that need it. Let's pray. God, I thank you so much for this day, and I just thank you for giving us the opportunity to worship you. And God, I thank you for the hope that you've given us. I pray, Lord, that during this holiday season, you will help us to stay in the temple. Help us to keep our focus on you in the middle of all of the distractions that are out there. And I pray, God, that you will lay people on our hearts that we need to encourage. I pray that you'll give us opportunities to share your love and your hope and your joy with the people around us. I pray all this in your name. Amen.
Thank you so much for joining us on the Bayshore podcast. I want to encourage you to take this message you just received and allow it to go deep into your soul and let Jesus do the deep work that only he can do. A special thanks to everyone that gives generously to Bayshore. It's because of you that this ministry is possible, creating life change all over the world. You can be a part of spreading the message around the world by going to bayshore.online and clicking Give. For all things Bayshore, visit bayshore.online to find out what your next step may be. You can subscribe right here and share this podcast with your friends and family. Thank you again for listening. God bless you.